You know the heartwarming Christmas story, the one with the baby in the manger, shepherds, wise men, angels. But do you know what Christmas does for us as a miracle? The Gospel of John tells us that Christmas story. John Grisham, in his delightful little book, Skipping Christmas, writes about a couple that decided that they would just forego Christmas for an entire year. They didn't have any kids coming home. They didn't see any reason for the lights and the tinsel and the decorations, so they decided to go on a cruise instead, only to find out in humorous ways that the Christmas event had meaning far beyond the external wrappings of the day. In the Gospel of John, we have a Christmas story, but it's not like what we read about in Matthew and Luke. John gives us Christmas from a theological perspective. I want to read you the Christmas verses in John, just the first 4 verses of the first chapter. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. All things were created through Him, and apart from Him, not one thing was created that has been created. In Him was life, and that life was the light of men." John is not interested so much with the story of Christmas as the impact of Christmas. He wants us to understand what the miracle really was, and I want to share that with you on this Truth Currents. First of all, Christmas shows us what God is like. Throughout the Old Testament, the greatest prophets of the ancient world dreamed of the day when God would make Himself known by stepping into human history in a remarkable way. In the Old Testament, God was an abstraction. He was a voice up on top of a mountain. He was a rumbling thunderstorm in a distant place. Even in the modern world, the idea of God is just that, an idea, but we don't have a good handle on who God is. We can learn some things from nature. We can assume some things about God. But the miracle of Christmas is that Jesus, the Word, became flesh and lived among us so that we could see what God is like. Jesus is the visible representation of the invisible God. If you want to know what God thinks about things, you look at Jesus. If you want to know how God responds to things, you look at the response of Jesus. Jesus puts God on display so that we no longer have this abstract idea of a supernatural being somewhere out in space, but we can know Him and be known by Him. In fact, Christmas shows us relationship possibilities. God became flesh so that He could speak to us and invite us back home into relationship with Him. That's part of the miracle of Christmas. Christmas shows us what God is like. But the Christmas miracle also shows us what we can be like as human beings. When Jesus came in the flesh, when that babe was born and placed in a manger, God, with supreme self-confidence, came in the form of a helpless baby because He knew that every experience of human life needed to be put on display so that we would know not just who God was, but that we would have a sense of who we were created to be. Jesus is not just a revelation of God. He's a revelation of perfect humanity. Our goal in eternity is to be everything that we were created and now redeemed to be. When we share life together, when we encourage others, when we are merciful and kind, when we live by truth, when we walk by faith, when we show kindness to other people, we see all of those things in the model of humanity put on display by Jesus. But those things sound surprisingly like what we call the Christmas spirit. You see, the miracle of Christmas is not only that Jesus shows us what God is like, it's not only that Jesus shows us what we can be like, but the miracle of Christmas is that we get a glimpse of what society could be like. Think about this. By receiving Jesus, we begin to share in His power to heal a wounded and damaged world. At Christmas, society puts its best foot forward. We put Santa Clauses in front of stores and people just give money. People give gifts to others that they haven't thought much about during the course of the year. Christmas is a time of mutual concern for the poor and needy. It's a time when we show care for our neighbors and friends. It's a family-oriented season when we become more generous in giving, when we are unselfish and joyful and unprejudiced. The original Christmas story had wise men, the very pinnacle of society, and shepherds, the very lowest of society. But the message was, in a society marked by Christmas, no one is out of bounds. What if the Christmas spirit could impact our society year-round? 2020 has shown us that we live in a more divided, a more angry world than we ever have in our lifetimes. We're divided by red and blue. We're divided by progressive and conservative. We're divided by any categories you can think of. Christmas is a miracle that can bring us together. Well, there's one more thing I want to talk to you about. Christmas does show us what God can be like, what God is like. It can show us what we were meant to be like. It can show us what society could be like. But Christmas also shows us the sacred beauty of life. Did you hear the last verse that we read, verse 4 of John chapter 1? It's a simple verse. It simply says, "In Him was life, and that life was the light of men." Christmas is a celebration of life. It is a call to life in a world of death. Christmas is a call to creation in a culture of destruction. It is a call to life as a holy gift and not just an inconvenient bother. My office received a call last week from a woman who had a Connecticut phone number. And she proceeded to tell my secretary that she was put out with something that I said. And she said that she took great pride in announcing that she had made a $100 donation to Planned Parenthood in the name of Dr. Michael Gabbert. Well, first of all, you do know that Planned Parenthood receives $500 million a year in taxpayer funding. $500 million. Listen, if there is an organization on the planet that doesn't need your money, it's Planned Parenthood. And that's not even thinking through the whole murdering babies thing. I had to think through that call, a donation in my name to Planned Parenthood. And so my wife and I talked it over, and that night I went online to the website for the Hope Crisis Pregnancy Center here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I made an equal donation for life. And it got me to thinking about this business of Christmas as a celebration of life. I want to suggest that you, this year, as you celebrate Christmas with your family, with your friends, in your churches, I want you to understand that Christmas is a celebration of life, but it also needs to be a practical celebration of life. So let me encourage you this Christmas to find a crisis pregnancy center in the city where you live, someplace close, and make a donation. It's just like giving one more Christmas gift. Do that to celebrate life, because remember, the miracle of Christmas is that in Him was life, and that life was the light of men. This is Truth Currents. Merry Christmas.